Nobody wants to.
If we could also remind everyone to please turn off your cell phones for the service.
Mine's just on silent. You get.
Yeah, nice. We'll do pretty helpful.
Top one in my back pocket. Backing me up.
Well, the shelter of the Most High will abide in the wings of life, will raise their voices in praise, for you deliver me from all separates and divides. I will not fear the shadows of the night, nor the confusion that comes by day. For you have sent angels to guide me, to watch over me and guide me in my ways. On their hands they will bear me up, lest I dash my foot against a stone. Though I walk among those who roar like the lions, because you cleave to me in love, I will protect you as you call upon my name. I will rescue and revere. I will dwell in your heart as a loving presence forever. Many of us have heard the teaching that says there are 3 crowns of achievement. Crowns meaning trophies or honors in this world. One is the crown of scholarship accorded to a person of wisdom and intelligence, learning and insight. The next is the crown of priesthood. We would say piety. Think of the Dalai Lama, for example. And then, of course, there is the crown of kingship. And today, we might understand that as a political leader, a leader in the political arena. But the teaching in our Jewish tradition goes on to say that there's actually a 4th crown, the crown of a good name. And the crown of a good name surpasses them all. Dr. David Patron proudly wore the crown of a good name. Dave was a man of principle, of fierce determination. He was conscientious, trustworthy, so hardworking and inventive. His medical career and sense of commitment to his patients, to our community, were extraordinary. And most significant was Dave's deep devotion to his family. The dedication he shared with Glennie for 62 plus years provides a model for all of us. So we've come this afternoon to pay tribute to the man who wore such an admirable crown. And we've come to bring comfort to the family that Dave cherished, doing our part to bring the caring to them as Dave brought to so many of you. So I say welcome. It's good and important that we're here together. For those I have not met, my name is Rabbi Sarah Gilbert, and it's truly my honor to lead our service this afternoon. It's good and important that we're here together because we've come to participate in a holy task to honor a very special man and acknowledge our gratitude for his life. For early on Wednesday morning, April 21st, recognized to be the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Iyar in the year 5781 on the Jewish calendar, David Patron departed this world. Now the lives of those whom he loved deeply are left more bereft of a husband, a father, grandfather, cousin, mentor, role model, and friend. We also hope that our service today will bring comfort to those who are among the most important people in Dave's life. Lenny, the love of your husband's life, with whom, in his words, he hit it off pretty quickly when you met. Our deepest sympathy to Rhonda and Brian, to Doug and Melanie, and to Dave's cherished grandchildren. You are your grandfather's legacy. Jason and his wife Lauren, Ryan and his wife Elizabeth, Sarah and her husband Scott, who's with us virtually today. My condolences to all. How you all were blessed by the love of a grandparent who admired you and taught you and provided sacred companionship for you. I want to mention also at this sorrowful time, Dave's cousin, Jerry Olish. Dave was an only child, but in his close friendship with Jerry, Dave found a doting big brother. How Dave treasured his close relationship with Jerry. And I extend sympathy to Glennie's sister Miriam, who's watching from Israel. So for these reasons, we thank the Almighty, consecrate our time together, and continue our service with the recitations of psalms and prayers. Mizmor LaDavid Adonai ro'ilo exar, b'no desha yabartzeni, amei menufot yinchaleni. A psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, giving me repose in green meadows, leading me beside the quiet waters to revive my spirit, guiding me in the right paths, for that is God's essence. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no harm, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a banquet before me in the presence of my foes. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness will be my portion all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of Adonai, my Lord, forever. Today, paying tribute to him, we will tell David Patron's story, a truly American story of hard work and success. And so in addition to the traditional Jewish aspects of our service, and having learned about the wordsmith that David was, I think that he would have liked to bring a bit of American poetry for us to share. James Russell Lowell, among one of my favorites, was a poet of the fireside school. And I imagine that Dave would have loved to share with Lowell his awe for the majesty of our mountains. And we can look to the west. We can't actually see the mountains through the trees, but we know they stand. Ye mountains that far off lift up your heads, seen dimly through their canopies of blue. The shade of my unrestful spirit sheds. Distance created beauty over you. I am not well content with this far view. How may I know what foot of loved one treads your rock, moss-grown and sun-dried torrent beds? We should love all things better if we knew what claims this nature upon our hearts. Perchance even now some eye that would be bright to meet my own looks on your mist-robed forms. Perchance your grandeur a deep joy imparts to souls that have encircled mine with light. O brother heart, with thee my spirit in nature warms. I am sad that I never had the pleasure of really getting to know Dr. Patron, only meeting him during the very final days of his life. So with your permission, I offer this bedspread, this eulogy, to share with you the facts and teachings of David's life that I learned from Lenny, Rhonda, Brian, Doug and Melanie, Jason, Brian, Sarah, and from Dave's own words in the autobiography that he composed so thoughtfully, with so much foresight, recording his memories and teachings for his family, for posterity. And I'll bring my few words to honor his memory and bring kavod, tribute to Dave's soul, as we prepare to lay him to rest. Born in London on July 16, 1935, Dave was the first and only child of Joseph and Rebecca Patron. Doug proudly relates that their patron name dates back centuries in Poland. But so wisely and thankfully, Joseph and Rebecca had fled their homeland before the tragedy that would befall Warsaw in the coming years. Joseph was a hard-working tailor, and life was not easy for the young family. David had vivid memories of the day when he was only 5, as the air raids sounded over London, that his father took his mother and him to the London railroad station to board a train to the north of England near the Scottish border to escape the anticipated bombing of London. Dave remembered how, at that young age, he experienced the first instances of anti-Semitism in that small village in Cumberland. At the age of 10, with the war over, Rebecca and Dave returned to Joseph in London, where post-war life continued to be so hard. Dave was an excellent student, but still he had difficult memories of the anti-Semitism that he experienced at school. Remember that this was a time that Israel was fighting for her independence, and the death of British soldiers in Palestine was blamed on the Jews. Fortunately for all of us, the patrons were able to book passage to New York on the Ile de France, which had been a troop ship and was newly refurbished. They arrived in New York, well supported by Joseph's American relatives, and soon they were on their way to Denver on a California Zephyr. How delighted, relieved, and appreciative the patrons were to be met by Ray, Isidore, and Jerry Olish, who had so generously sent them care packages in England. The Olishes were to become their lifelong friends, their angels. Still, life was hard in their new home. The family was poor. Joseph worked long and hard in downtown Denver. It took Dave some time to adjust to life in America, but always the good student, he came to thrive. It was during this time that he discovered a lifelong interest in photography, not only the taking of pictures with his Brownie camera, but in the process of photographic development. And decades later, sharing his love of photography with his granddaughter, Sarah, brought Dave and Sarah so much pleasure. Life for all struggling immigrant families was so difficult. Joseph returned to New York for work. Rebecca and Dave followed, but it did not work out well for Dave living in a tenement in Brooklyn. And he returned alone to Denver and North High School at the age of 16. We can only imagine the determination and courage it took for a teen to travel cross country, leaving parents behind. Eventually, Dave did Denver girl, Glennie, the extrovert that she is, she had her eye on him and so introduced herself to the tall, handsome student. But there was certainly that spark, or as I mentioned in Dave's own words, they hit it off pretty quickly. It was 3 years later that Glennie and Dave were married. In 1958, at her parents' synagogue, the Hebrew Educational Alliance, where later Rhonda and Dave attended Hebrew school and Doug became a bar mitzvah. Dave started medical school at the University of Colorado. Glennie was a secretary in an insurance office until Rhonda was born. And then only 16 months later, Doug was born. What a challenging and busy time this was for a young mother and a medical school student father. When Dave attained his medical degree after 1 year of internship at Mercy Hospital, and we Denverites remember this institution that sat by City Park, Dave avoided the draft by joining the Army Medical Corps as a captain. Dave and Glennie and their babies first drove to Texas for training and then service in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania at Valley Forge. Again, in Dave's words, the family could not wait to get back to Denver at the time of Dave's discharge. And as he said, the rest is history. Dave began his private practice, growing his reputation as a most caring and compassionate practitioner. The rate for an office visit at the time was $7. So looking forward and with concern for his young family, Dave tried other business ventures, eventually starting work where he found his passion as an occupational medicine physician, working for Mountain Bell and then the Denver Mint. I am so fascinated by Dave's story, but having given just a taste of the background of this remarkable man whom we honor today, I want to call upon his family in a moment. Dave and Glennie went on to raise their family in Lakewood, so enjoying the beauty of Colorado, loving the outdoors, fishing, four-wheeling. Dave was an avid cyclist. Every summer, the family spent time in Glenwood Springs. Yet Dave was also a voracious reader and one who enjoyed music of all varieties, having over 500 CDs in his collection. I recognize the skill and devotion that Dave brought to his profession. Dave was a remarkable, talented diagnostician, detailed, observant, so concerned for every individual. And I mentioned the mechanical aptitude that Dave had. He was a tinkerer, a fixer, an inventor. I was in awe to hear that Dave was the first inventor of what he called the trash masher. I love those trash compactors as I raised my family. Perhaps it was one of his very early jobs as a bowling machine mechanic that helped develop that mechanical skill. And I point out also Dave's fascination with vocabulary, the meaning of words, a deep interest that he instilled in his children and grandchildren and their spouses. But what is most significant as we are gathered together this afternoon is the father, the grandfather that David Patron was, the loving and devoted dad, the teacher, the mentor, the companion. And for this part of the story, I'm very glad to now call upon those who loved and knew Dave best. His a wonderful family will tell you more about the man, the father, the individual that David Patron was. I'm glad to call first Rhonda, who brings her words and reflection.
Although this is an extremely difficult time for all of us, I want to express the incredible positive influences that my dad had on me as a child and into my adulthood. As a child, there were many times I was resistive to what my dad was wanting me to do, as there was no understanding as to why. As an adult, I now see why he did some of the things he did. Dad had high expectations of me as a child and as a female. He taught me to be strong and to be a critical thinker. He wanted to ensure I could do everything I wanted independently if there was a need to not to rely on anyone. To this day, I cannot thank him enough. An example that stands out is when I was 15 and a half, wanting to drive. Before I could drive, I had to know the parts of the vehicle, how to change a tire and oil in the vehicle, and drive a standard car before I could drive an automatic. In addition, I had to know the streets of Denver in alphabetical order, so I could not get lost. To this day, I still remember them because of him, my dad. Lincoln, Sherman, Grant, Logan, Pennsylvania Pearl, I could go on through the rest of them, but I won't. These are examples of skills used into my adulthood, especially owning my own business. There were many special times that we had as a family growing up. These are a few that stand out. Our family owned a wheelies Jeep. In the wintertime, we would go tubing as a family. I was spoiled as a kid, as my brother and I would tube down, and when we got to the bottom of the hill, my dad was waiting at the bottom and would tie our tubes that we had ridden down on the Jeep and pull us back up the hill. It was well worth it, as not having to climb back up that hill to slide down again. We had summer vacations in Glenwood Springs. As we got older, we were able to go out on our own and go putt-putt golfing. We always had a dog growing up, and Dad was an animal lover. This taught me responsibilities of needing to take care of a living animal. Taking family drives to Colorado Springs was another memorable moment to eat Michelle's ice cream. Unfortunately, it's not there anymore. I was truly fortunate to have a dad around for 60 years of my life. He was a mentor to Brian, teaching him how to work on cars, fix and repair, or replace items needed in owning a home. Once Jason and Ryan were old enough to interact with him, he became a positive influence on them as well. He always challenged them and made them become critical thinkers, which helped to make them who they are today, fine young men. I will miss him terribly as the years go on, but will always cherish and remember the many things that he taught me and helped me to mold who I am today. In closing, I would like to share a recent story. About 5 weeks ago, he was at our home. He was talking about wanting a large Kleenex that he used many years ago. I told him that I would find them for him on the internet, something he couldn't understand, that within a day we could get something. Unfortunately, these were from London. They arrived a couple of days prior to him going into home hospice. I have them here today for anyone who would need them. They are large sized. I love you, Dad, and want to thank you for all that you did for me, my family. I could have not asked for a better father.
Rhonda, thank you for your beautiful heartfelt words. Doug.
one of the taller members of the family. Move this up here a bit. Oh, what a beautiful day. Yeah, what a beautiful day to be gathered here to pay our respects and reflect on the wonderful life of my father. Anybody that knew my father would know that he would say that this is silly. We should be off enjoying ourselves, enjoying the weather, doing something fun and or productive rather than mourning. Those of us who really knew my father would know that he was much more sensitive, sentimental, and emotional than he let on. That he cared about people and their emotions, the need to express grief, the traditions that are on full display at times like this. He was less concerned about showing the softer, more understanding side as he grew older. His ability to read people was uncanny. I'm sure many of you know what I mean. Sometimes frighteningly so, especially when I was the recipient of an analysis that I was hoping wasn't true, but was spot on. This happened many times growing up, but I think back to less than 2 weeks ago in the hospital when we discussed the reality of his medical situation. Even though I tried to put on my best face, he knew how upset I was. He said, "I wish this wasn't so painful for you." I told him that maybe he shouldn't have been such a great father, it would be less painful. And he laughed and he smiled. The lighter side, the things I remember about our relationship through the years. There are too many good things to talk about, but one in particular, growing up, I couldn't wait for the spring thaw so that we could take our dog Rusty and Dad's four-wheel drive Willys up to Idaho Springs Reservoir or Gross Reservoir to fish on his day off during the week. And as Tom Youngberg, who is part of the family here, is here now, well, I also have to say that we used to take his little boat up there, his little outboard, and we'd go up there and we'd go to Yampa, we'd go to Sheriff Reservoir, and a little extemporaneous here, but I think it's apropos. We would be out there fishing, trolling. Dad would be there, Tom and I'd be there, and invariably Tom and I would get our lures wrapped up together. So the fishing line would become entangled, and with flatfish, they roll on each other. So it's much easier to cut the line. Well, Dad would never cut the line. He was there, Tom and I say, let's fish. And cut the line. We've got plenty of fishing line. We can just start over again. And he would be there untangling the lures. Okay. So back to what I was going to say about fishing. We'd be up there on the day off. We'd go fishing, and he would fish. I was quite impatient if the fish weren't biting by the second cast. I'd be off with Rusty running around through the trees or skipping rocks on the lake. Dad would tell me to stop scaring the fish, and he would keep casting. He always had success fishing, whether he caught fish or not. The tranquility, the mountain air, the solitude was more important than the fish. In fact, to tell you the truth, he didn't care for the fish or for cleaning them. But if he did catch any fish, he'd made sure I was familiar with their anatomy when we were cleaning them. He was a teacher. Sometimes his classroom was not ideal, like in the garage in the middle of the winter, working on the cars. I still don't know how he managed to stay warm and focused wearing short sleeve shirts. You could work on your own cars in those days, and he made sure I knew how. And Rhonda touched on that as well. But change the oil, rotate the tires, fill the battery, bleed the brakes. Many times when I get in my car for a long drive, which in Houston is just about all the time, I think about my dad and wonder whether he would admonish me for not checking the air in the tires or the oil level or not having a full tank of gas. Like father, like son, ask my daughter Sarah if I've ever asked her about checking the air in the tires. And then there were the dinner table lessons. He frequently used big, or what we would call sesquipedalian words, or unusual words, sometimes in French. And if Rhonda and I weren't wise to the provocation and dared to ask what they meant, he'd say, look it up. I still have a tattered dictionary that had most, but not all the words he used. He was a voracious reader, as the rabbi said, and his memory was amazing. Jokes, he repeated the best of them many times, as we all do, but his repertoire, his ability to remember jokes and puns that fit the occasion was remarkable. He often complained that he couldn't remember or tell jokes as he used to, but I don't think he ever really lost it. Not even near the end. His quick wit made me laugh out loud while he was in the hospital. A doctor came in the room to speak to him one morning, I asked Dad if he'd like for me to put his hearing aids in, and his response was, "No, I need them." Another time, the nurse, prior to giving him his medications, asked him when his birthday was, just to check and make sure it was really giving the right medications to the right person. And he said July 16th. When she asked what year, he said, "Every year." Well, he'll have no more birthdays, but he has been a great influence in my life, and I will celebrate his birthday and every day that I had the good fortune of having him for my father. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. I think we're all continuing to learn from Dave as you tell his story. Jason.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jason, and I'm the eldest grandson of Grandpa Patron. I've been extremely fortunate to have many memories with Grandpa over the years that span my childhood and adult years. He is a great grandpa who taught me to think critically, question everything, and to be an exemplary person. Sometimes I never realized the life lessons he was trying to teach until later on in life. For example, when I was younger, Grandpa reached out to me asking if I had some money to loan him. At the time, I could not imagine that my grandpa needed money to borrow, but he instructed me to write a promissory note at an agreed upon interest rate. In hindsight, this was clearly a way for Grandpa to teach me a valuable life lesson about interest and finances. It was also his secretive way to get a little bit of money in the interest paid for the loan premium. While it seemed at times that Grandpa was always teaching or asking about these important life lessons in those dinner conversations mentioned, he also made sure to have fun and appreciate how fortunate he was, having not had much in his earlier childhood. With what little Grandpa had growing up, he made sure that was not the case for the grandchildren. He let us know it was important to spend money on fun things, especially when him and Grandma gifted money at birthdays and holidays, in addition to saving for life events. Also, because of his upbringing, nothing was to be wasted and everything could be used or fixed again secondhand. Other memories I have with Grandpa include taking a road trip to Houston to see Uncle Doug, Aunt Mel, and Sarah in middle school. A funny aside, I learned on the drive down that he never had any cavities. I think still to this day he never did. Loved toothpicks and never went to the dentist. He credited the absence of cavities to brushing his teeth with some sort of soap, not toothpaste. He also taught me how to use a CB radio to talk to the truckers. In my adult years, and once I turned 21, I enjoyed my time going up the hill to gamble with him and Grandma. I joke that Grandma and Grandpa are the ones guilty of getting me into gambling, as I started out playing the video poker machines with them at Ameristar. They never graduated to the table games yet, though. Grandpa will be truly missed, but I am proud to say how much I've learned from him. I know he is proud of the grandchildren and the adults we have become. Love you, Grandpa. Thank you.
So beautiful, Jason. Brian.
Hello, everybody. So I'm sure everyone will remember Grandpa would regularly go to the Socrates meetings, and always remember just how he would confide in us that these meetings were more of an opportunity for the members to show up and have discussions about philosophical questions. But of course, it's no surprise to everybody here and watching that he enjoyed going to these meetings more as an opportunity to rile up some feathers and argue with some random people. However, all jokes aside, Grandpa and I would often share these same philosophical discussions ourselves outside of the meetings, and many times over lunches at his favorite restaurants, where it'd sit for a couple of hours just talking about life. I feel very fortunate that through these discussions, he would share stories of his childhood and life that led him to form his worldviews, the philosophies that he had. And through these talks, I was able to understand my grandpa on a much deeper level. And in turn, he was able to understand me too. As I've been getting older, I've been reflecting on the traits I'd most like to emulate from those that I'm closest to. Grandpa had a multitude of these. I'd love to share his quick wit, knowledge, skills as a physician. Although now I realize just how unattainable these may be due to his sheer brilliance. So I most wish to emulate the way he treated everyone with love, caring, compassion. Personally, I feel this in the way Grandpa approached our relationship, always treating me as a close friend and confidant. I can see now that these same qualities are what led to his many close friendships with the friends and family here and those that couldn't be here. It's brought everyone together today to celebrate his life. And I think that, as Doug would say, he would always say that, live life to its fullest, and that death is just an inevitable part of life. And so I know that he would just be happy to see us all here together.
Brian, your words and your memories are so touching. And again, we will continue to learn from your grandfather. Knowing how Dave chose to make Colorado his home, always returning here and learning of his deep appreciation for our magnificent city and mountains, I can't help but think of one of the most beautiful chapters from the book of Psalms 121. And I honor Dave now with a Psalm of Colorado. Shir hamalot esa ene el hahar mai ayin yavo ezri. I lift my eyes to the mountains. From where will my inspiration come? My wisdom comes from the Creator of heaven and earth. I am strengthened and upheld. My foot will not give way. My guardian will not slumber. The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. For the sun warms us by day, and the moon and stars guide us at night. But I will not fear the darkness. By the light of our life, I will be guarded in my going and my coming from this time forth and forevermore. Burial is the last physical act that we can do for our loved one and friend. It is an act referred to in the Hebrew as chesed shel amet, an expression of true and pure honor and compassion, for the deceased can in no way repay this kindness in return. The burial is difficult, but will help start the mourners on their way to acceptance. The casket is fully lowered, and I invite everyone to join with me in taking up the shovel, or if you're comfortable doing so, using your hand to lift some earth to fill the kever, fill the grave at this time. So I invite all of us to please come and participate in this mitzvah.
Come up here, Mom, and then I'll give it to you.
I'll get you a card for it.
Yeah.
Hey, Jack, that's nice to remember about the untangling of the lines. I love it. Thank you. We have so many memories.
Oh, Yavov Shalom. May Dave go unto God in peace. Ki afar atav el afar yashuv. For you are, we all are but dust, and to dust we shall return. Adonai Natan, Adonai Lachaki, Shem Adonai Mebarach. God has given and God takes away. May the name of our Lord be blessed.
Thank you so much. Good luck with your studies. Sarah?
Do Korea now, the tearing of the ribbons.
Get together.
As I mentioned, this tradition comes from the Bible. We should be 3,000 years old.
I like that.
Tearing of one's clothes. Ribbons. The moment will tear.
Hey, Jason. You know, and I love it too because we know more about it. Yeah, I mean,
That's good. That's good. We say his lessons. Praise are you, Lord our God, sovereign. And especially that we cannot understand why we have death. To accept. So they are going to ask it about But I invite everyone to come back to their seats and we'll have concluding prayers and blessings.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. They wanted to come back to our seats.
Please, we have some,
Thank you, Armand.
we have some concluding prayers and blessings to do, so please come back.
Tom.
Tom.
Got some wine.
So, no, that's understandable. Sad time. We'll wait a moment. Jason, Elizabeth.
Well. Let me ask you one second. All right.
There is a beautiful, very old blessing sung at funerals. And I'll chant at this time the traditional prayer for the ascent and peace of Dave's soul. So I invite everyone, as you're comfortable doing so, to please rise for the El Malay Rachamim. First, I'll chant in Hebrew, and then, of course, provide the translation. El Malay Rachamim, Shochein B'Marumim, Amsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, B'Ma'alot Kedoshim Utovim, B'Zohar Harakim Mazirim, Et Nishmat David ben Yosef, Shahalach La'olamo, Began Eden Tehemen Kato, Ana Ba'al Harachamim, Asirehu, V'Seter Kenapecha La'olamim, Utror B'Tror HaChaim Et Nishmato, Adonai V'Nechalato, Vayanuach V'Shalom Al Mishkavo, V'Nomar Amen. El Malay Rachamim, merciful God who dwells on high and in our hearts, grant perfect peace to the soul of David ben Yosef, who has gone to his eternal rest. Shelter him in your divine presence, for in your hands are the souls of the living and the deceased. May David ben Yosef's memory be a source of solace and healing, abiding among all who knew him as a lasting blessing. May his memory inspire those who knew him to live justly and kindly. May David's soul be at peace. May he be bound up in the bonds of eternal life. And together we all say, Amen. The Hebrew month of Iyar is a month of spring, of renewal, and it's difficult to think of new life at this time of looking backward and remembering a time of sadness and loss. But the end of a life is not the end of a relationship. Our memories and our caring continue on. The voice of he who lives no more still will echo within your thoughts, and what he was has become woven into what you are. The world that God created is filled with mysteries beyond our comprehension, but I believe that we are surrounded by the presence of those we have loved and who have departed. The mourner's Kaddish said at the cemetery marks a transition, and this is the time of transition of a life. Death is not an ending, but a time when Dave's soul begins its ascent from this world to the next. And let me give you copies of the mourner's Kaddish. We'll read in English. We'll read in Hebrew, and then I'll provide translation. Yikadal v'yikadash shemei rabbah, v'yalmad divra kirutei, v'yamlech malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei v'chol beit Yisrael, v'agala u'bizman kari v'yimeru amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevarach li'olam omei omaya. Yitbarak, Vayishtabach, Vayitpa'ar, Vayitroman, Vayitnase, Vayitadar, Vayitalev, Vayitalal, Shemedi Kudusha, Brifu, La'ela Minko, Birchata, Vashirata, Tushbachata, Venechamata, Da'amiran, Bialma, Yimaru, Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu, V'al Yisrael, V'yimaru, Amen. Osei Shalom B'mamar, Huya Asei Shalom, Aleinu, V'al Yisrael, V'yimaru, Amen. May God's great name grow exalted and sanctified in the world that our Lord created. May God's great name be blessed forever and ever, glorified, exalted, extolled, upraised, and lauded. Be the name of the Holy One, beyond any blessing and song. May there be abundant peace from heaven and life bestowed upon us and upon all. May the one who makes peace in the heights grant peace to us. And once again, we all respond. Amen. Let me be seated for just a moment. Eternal God, let your presence rest upon us as we give thanks for Jesus, Patron's life and love. As he taught those who knew him to live life with an expansive heart, to care for and respect each other, to work hard, to think creatively. We thank you now for the days and the years that you gave to him. His memory will live long among you and be a source of blessing and strength, especially for Glennie and Rhonda and Doug and their families. Dave's memory will inspire you to live your lives with more kindness, inquiry, energy, and generosity of spirit. We thank you and pray to you, God, that the ongoing journey of Dave's soul now be filled with repose and happiness. So we've completed the aspect of the funeral that emphasized our honoring of the deceased. And those of us from community here have the task of comforting the mourners. Adonai, you are close to the hearts of the sorrowing. Please strengthen the mourners with the warmth of your love. Even as we pray for perfect peace for him whose life has ended, so do we ask God to grant comfort and courage to the living. Grant to our mourners who most deeply feel this loss, the comfort of your presence. And so I recite the traditional words of blessing for comfort. And then as we end our service, I'll invite all of you to add your personal thoughts and hugs. Hamachom yinechem etchem b'tok sha'ar avei Tzion Yerushalayim. May God comfort you among all who mourn in this world, among the mourners for Zion and Jerusalem. So we have a Shiva gathering this evening, 6:30. And I extend thanks to Lauren for setting that up. And the link is on the Feldman Mortuary website. So you can just click on that link at 6:30. And meantime, I thank you all so much for coming together, for being here to honor David Patron's memory and to bring comfort to each other. Hold tight, hold tight. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Let's begin.
My cell phone. If you get it.
just be rolled. Fill out this. So these are the certified copies. Here's a shipping candle that you like.
Really appreciate you showing up. I had no doubt you would.
No doubt you would.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you very much. Yeah. See you.
Julie's out there. Near, just north of the old airport.